Marcus Blackwood stepped out of his black luxury car and looked up at the tall glass building in front of him. The Grand Palace Hotel was the most expensive place in the city. Tonight it was hosting the annual Children's Charity Gala, and Marcus was one of the main guests. He wore a perfect black suit that cost more than most people made in a month. His shoes were made of the finest leather, and his watch was worth more than a small house. Marcus walked through the large glass doors and into the hotel lobby. Everything around him screamed wealth and power. The floors were made of white marble that shined like mirrors. Crystal lights hung from the high ceiling, casting sparkles across the room. Rich people in expensive clothes walked around talking and laughing with wine glasses in their hands. Marcus loved events like this. Not because he cared about helping children, but because it made him look good. Being seen at charity events was important for his business image. He owned 3 successful tech companies and had more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. At 42 years old, he had everything he wanted except one thing: people's respect. He thought money would bring respect, but deep down, he knew people only smiled at him because of his wealth. As Marcus walked deeper into the lobby, he nodded at other wealthy guests. They all knew who he was: Marcus Blackwood, the man who turned a small computer business into a billion-dollar empire. He enjoyed the way people looked at him with a mix of admiration and fear. Power felt good to him. The lobby was huge, with comfortable chairs and sofas placed around small tables. In the center of the room stood a beautiful black grand piano. It was polished so well that Marcus could see his reflection in it. The piano was there for decoration, he thought. Rich people like to look at expensive things even if they never use them. Marcus was walking toward the main event hall when something caught his eye. Near the grand piano, sitting alone on a small chair, was a young boy. The child looked completely out of place in this world of luxury and wealth. The boy appeared to be about 8 or 9 years old. His clothes told a story that was very different from everyone else in the hotel. He wore a thin jacket that was too big for his small body. The jacket was clean but old, with patches sewn on the elbows where the fabric had worn through. His pants were too short, showing his thin ankles. His shoes had holes in them, and Marcus could see that the boy had tried to cover the holes with tape. The boy's hair was messy, as if he had tried to comb it with his fingers. His face was clean, but Marcus could see that his clothes had been washed many times. Everything about the child showed that he came from a world where money was hard to find. Marcus stopped walking and stared at the boy. What was a poor child doing in the most expensive hotel in the city? This was a place for rich people, not for kids who looked like they came from the streets. The boy was sitting very still, looking around the lobby with wide eyes. He seemed amazed by everything he saw. Other guests were starting to notice the boy too. Marcus heard whispers behind him. People were pointing and talking quietly about the strange sight. Some looked confused, others looked annoyed. A few people seemed worried that the boy might steal something or cause trouble. Marcus felt anger growing inside him. This boy was ruining the perfect atmosphere of the event. Rich people came here to feel special and important. They did not want to be reminded that poor people existed. The sight of this child made Marcus uncomfortable, but not because he felt sorry for the boy. Marcus was angry because the child was a reminder of everything Marcus tried to avoid thinking about. The boy turned his head and looked directly at Marcus. Their eyes met for a moment. The child's eyes were big and brown, and they held a sadness that made Marcus even more uncomfortable. But there was something else in those eyes too. The boy looked at Marcus without fear, even though Marcus was clearly rich and powerful. Most people looked at Marcus with either respect or fear, but this child just looked at him like he was any other person. Marcus decided he had seen enough. He was going to do something about this situation. He straightened his expensive tie and walked toward the boy with confident steps. His leather shoes clicked loudly on the marble floor as he approached. Other guests noticed Marcus walking toward the child and began to gather around. They wanted to see what the famous Marcus Blackwood would do. Some pulled out their phones, thinking they might see something interesting enough to record. As Marcus got closer, he could see more details about the boy. The child was holding something in his hands, a small piece of paper that looked like it had been folded and unfolded many times. The boy's fingers were clean but showed signs of hard work. His nails were short and simple, very different from the perfectly manicured hands of the wealthy guests around him. Marcus stopped right in front of the boy and looked down at him. The height difference made Marcus feel even more powerful. He was a tall man, and standing over the small child made him feel like a giant. The boy looked up at him with those same calm, sad eyes. The lobby around them became quieter as people sensed that something was about to happen. The conversations became whispers, and the whispers became silence. Even the hotel staff stopped what they were doing to watch. Marcus smiled, but it was not a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who was about to enjoy making another person feel small and embarrassed. He had an idea that would entertain the crowd and get rid of this unwanted reminder of poverty at the same time. The boy continued to look up at Marcus, waiting to see what would happen. He did not look scared, which surprised Marcus. Most people, especially children, became nervous when Marcus used his intimidating stare, but this boy just sat quietly, holding his piece of paper and waiting. Marcus felt the eyes of the wealthy crowd watching him. This was his moment to show everyone how he dealt with problems. He was about to speak when he noticed something that made him pause for just a second. The boy was looking at the grand piano with longing in his eyes. It was clear that the child was fascinated by the beautiful instrument. This gave Marcus an even better idea. He was going to turn this situation into entertainment for himself and his wealthy friends. His smile grew wider as he prepared to speak to the child who had dared to enter his world of luxury and privilege. Marcus cleared his throat loudly, making sure everyone in the lobby could hear him. The sound echoed off the marble walls and crystal lights. People stopped their conversations completely now. All eyes were on Marcus and the small boy sitting near the piano. Well, Marcus said in a voice that was loud enough for everyone to hear. What do we have here? He looked down at the boy with a fake smile that did not reach his eyes. You seem to be lost, little fellow. This is a very special party for very special people. The boy looked up at Marcus without saying anything. He held his small piece of paper tighter in his hands. His brown eyes stayed calm, but Marcus could see that the child understood he was in trouble. More wealthy guests moved closer to watch what was happening. They formed a half circle around Marcus and the boy. Some of them had wine glasses in their hands, and others held small plates of expensive food. They looked excited, like they were about to watch an interesting show. Marcus enjoyed having an audience. He lived for moments like this when everyone was paying attention to him. He put his hands in his pockets and rocked back and forth on his expensive shoes. Tell me, son, Marcus continued, how did you get into this hotel? Did someone bring you here? He looked around at the crowd with a knowing smile. Because I have to say, you don't exactly look like you belong at a charity gala for the city's most important people. A few people in the crowd laughed quietly. One woman in a shiny dress whispered something to her friend, and they both giggled. Marcus felt pleased with himself. He was entertaining his wealthy friends while dealing with this problem at the same time. The boy still did not speak. He looked around at all the rich people staring at him. Marcus could see that the child was starting to feel embarrassed, but he was not crying or running away like Marcus expected. Cat got your tongue? Marcus asked, his voice getting louder. Or maybe you just don't speak English very well. More people laughed at this comment. Marcus felt powerful and in control. Then the boy did something that surprised everyone. He stood up slowly and looked directly at Marcus. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but clear. My name is Samuel, the boy said. I can speak English just fine, sir. Marcus was not expecting the boy to have such good manners or to speak so clearly. For a moment he felt a little uncomfortable, but then he remembered that everyone was watching him, and he could not let a poor child make him look weak. Samuel, Marcus repeated, making the name sound silly. Well, Samuel, this is a very expensive party. The people here have paid thousands of dollars just to attend. Each person in this room could probably buy your entire neighborhood. He gestured around at the wealthy crowd. So I am curious about how a boy like you ended up in a place like this. Samuel looked down at his worn shoes for a moment, then back up at Marcus. I am waiting for someone, he said simply. Waiting for someone? Marcus laughed loudly. Who could you possibly be waiting for here? Your personal butler? Your private driver? The crowd laughed harder at Marcus's jokes. He was enjoying himself now. Samuel's face turned a little red, but he kept his dignity. I am waiting for Mrs. Patterson. She told me to wait here while she talked to the people organizing the charity event. Marcus raised his eyebrows. Mrs. Patterson? And who is this mysterious Mrs. Patterson? Another homeless person you know? He looked around at his audience to make sure they were still enjoying his performance. "She is my music teacher," Samuel said quietly. Marcus paused. "Music teacher?" He looked at the boy more carefully. Then he noticed something he had missed before. Samuel's eyes kept glancing at the beautiful grand piano in the center of the lobby. The boy was not just looking at it like someone who thought it was pretty. He was looking at it like someone who wanted to touch it, to play it. This gave Marcus a wonderful idea. An idea that would entertain his wealthy friends and humiliate this poor boy at the same time. Marcus's smile became even wider and more cruel. "Music teacher," Marcus said slowly, making the words sound ridiculous. "So you think you can play music, do you, Samuel?" He walked closer to the boy, making himself seem even taller and more intimidating. Samuel nodded slightly. "Yes, sir. I can play." Marcus laughed so loudly that people from other parts of the lobby turned to see what was happening. "You can play music? That's fascinating." He turned to face the crowd of rich people. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a little musician here." The crowd was enjoying Marcus's show. They whispered to each other and smiled. Some of them looked at Samuel like he was an interesting animal in a zoo. Marcus walked over to the grand piano and ran his hand along its shiny black surface. "This piano cost more money than most people make in 5 years," he announced to the crowd. "It is a work of art. Only the most skilled musicians in the world should touch an instrument like this." He walked back to Samuel and looked down at him with mock seriousness. "But you know what, Samuel? I am feeling generous tonight. I am going to give you a chance to prove that you belong in this world of wealth and culture." The crowd became completely silent. Everyone wanted to hear what Marcus was going to say next. Marcus spoke slowly and clearly, making sure every word was heard by everyone in the lobby. "Here is my offer, little Samuel. If you can play something on that piano that actually impresses me, and I mean really impresses me, then I will adopt you myself. I will take you home to my mansion. I will give you nice clothes, good food, and all the music lessons you could ever want." The crowd gasped. Some people looked shocked that Marcus would make such an offer. Others looked excited to see what would happen next. Marcus continued, "But if you cannot play well enough to impress me, then you will admit that you do not belong here with important people. You will apologize for wasting our time and leave this hotel immediately." Samuel looked at Marcus with those big brown eyes. Then he looked at the piano. Then he looked at all the wealthy people staring at him. Marcus could see that the boy was thinking carefully about the offer. "And just so we are clear," Marcus added with a cruel smile, "I am very hard to impress. I have heard the best musicians in the world play at my private parties. So whatever you think you can do on that piano, it had better be extraordinary." The crowd was completely fascinated now. They moved closer, forming a tighter circle around Marcus and Samuel. Some people pulled out their phones to record what was about to happen. Others called their friends over to watch the show. Marcus felt wonderful. He had created the perfect entertainment for his wealthy friends. Either the boy would fail miserably and provide them all with a good laugh, or the impossible would happen, and the child would actually be able to play well. Either way, Marcus would be the center of attention. Samuel stood quietly for a long moment looking at the piano. Marcus could see that the boy was nervous now, but he was also determined. Finally, Samuel looked back at Marcus and spoke in a clear, steady voice. "I accept your challenge, sir." Marcus rubbed his hands together with excitement. "Excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to witness either a miracle or a disaster." The crowd laughed and clapped their hands. Samuel walked slowly toward the grand piano. His small figure looked even smaller next to the large, expensive instrument. The crowd followed him, creating a circle around the piano so everyone could see and hear what was about to happen. Marcus crossed his arms and prepared to enjoy the show. He was confident that this poor boy would embarrass himself terribly, and then Marcus would be the hero who put the child in his place. It was going to be a perfect evening. Samuel walked toward the grand piano with slow, careful steps. Every person in the hotel lobby watched him move across the shiny marble floor. His worn shoes made soft sounds that seemed very loud in the quiet room. The wealthy guests formed a circle around the piano, holding their wine glasses and expensive purses, waiting to see what would happen. Marcus stood with his arms crossed, wearing a big smile on his face. He was sure this would be entertaining. He imagined the boy sitting at the piano and making terrible sounds while everyone laughed. Then Samuel would run away crying and Marcus would be the hero of the evening. The rich people would talk about this story for months. Samuel reached the piano bench and stopped. The bench was made of black leather and looked very expensive. The boy stood next to it for a moment, looking up at the piano keys. The piano was much bigger than Samuel. When he sat down, his feet did not touch the floor. His small hands looked tiny compared to the wide keyboard in front of him. The crowd of wealthy people moved closer. They wanted to get the best view of what they thought would be a funny show. Some people were already starting to smile, expecting to laugh soon. Others held up their phones, ready to record the boy's failure. Marcus walked closer too. He wanted to see Samuel's face when the boy realized he could not actually play the piano well. Marcus imagined how embarrassed Samuel would feel when he had to admit he was not good enough for this world of rich people. Samuel adjusted his position on the bench. He was so small that he had to sit on the very edge to reach the piano keys properly. His thin legs hung down and his old shoes swayed slightly as he got comfortable. The boy looked at the piano keys for a long moment as if he was thinking about something important. The piano had 88 keys, black and white, all perfectly clean and shiny. The keys reflected the crystal lights from the ceiling, making them sparkle. Samuel reached out and gently touched one white key with his finger. The sound was clear and beautiful, echoing through the lobby. "Well," Marcus said loudly, making sure everyone could hear him. "We don't have all night, young man. Show us what you can do." His voice was full of fake enthusiasm, like he was talking to a pet that was about to do a trick. Some people in the crowd laughed at Marcus's comment. They were enjoying watching the poor boy being put in such an uncomfortable position. A woman in a gold dress whispered to her friend, "This is so embarrassing for the child. Why doesn't someone stop this?" But her friend whispered back, "Shh, this is entertaining." Besides, the boy agreed to it. Samuel heard the whispers and the laughter, but he did not look upset. Instead, he placed both hands on the piano keys. His fingers were thin and his hands were small, but he positioned them like someone who knew what they were doing. Marcus noticed how Samuel held his hands and felt a tiny bit of surprise. The boy's posture looked like he might actually know something about piano playing, but Marcus pushed this thought away. How could a poor street child know anything about real music? Samuel took a deep breath. Then he pressed his fingers down on the keys and began to play. The first notes were soft and gentle. They filled the lobby with a sweet sound that made everyone stop whispering immediately. The notes were not random or messy like Marcus expected. They were organized and purposeful, like the beginning of a real song. Marcus's smile became a little less confident. These first few notes sounded better than he thought they would, but he told himself that anyone could play a few simple notes. The real test would come when Samuel tried to play something more difficult. Samuel continued playing. His small fingers moved across the keys with surprising skill. He was playing a melody that was both sad and beautiful. The notes flowed together like water, each one connecting perfectly to the next one. The crowd became completely silent. People who had been expecting to laugh were now listening carefully. The wine glasses stopped moving toward lips. The whispered conversations ended completely. Even the hotel staff who had been working nearby stopped what they were doing to listen. Marcus felt his confident smile beginning to fade. This was not what he had planned. The boy was actually playing real music, not just random noise. Marcus could hear that Samuel knew what he was doing with the piano. Samuel's performance was growing more complex. His left hand began playing deep, rich notes while his right hand played the melody. This required skill and practice that Marcus had not expected from a poor child. The boy's small hands moved with confidence and grace. The music Samuel was playing sounded familiar to some people in the crowd. It was a classical piece, something that required years of training to play correctly. But Samuel was not just playing the notes. He was playing with feeling and emotion that made the music come alive. Marcus began to feel uncomfortable. This was not going according to his plan. The boy was supposed to embarrass himself, not impress people. Marcus looked around at the crowd and saw that people were not laughing anymore. They were listening with serious expressions on their faces. A man in an expensive suit standing near Marcus whispered, "Where did this child learn to play like this?" A woman next to him replied quietly, "I don't know, but he's really quite good." Marcus did not like hearing these comments. He had wanted people to laugh at Samuel, not praise him. But the boy kept playing, and the music kept getting more beautiful. Samuel's fingers moved faster now, playing more difficult parts of the piece. His hands crossed over each other as he reached for different keys. The melody became more exciting and dramatic. The boy seemed to forget that he was surrounded by wealthy strangers. He was lost in the music. The sound of the piano filled every corner of the hotel lobby. The music was so beautiful that people from other parts of the hotel began walking toward the lobby to see where it was coming from. Hotel guests who were in their rooms could hear the piano through the walls and came downstairs to listen. Marcus watched Samuel's face and saw something that surprised him. The boy was not just playing the piano. He was feeling the music deeply. Samuel's eyes were closed now, and his face showed pure concentration and joy. It was clear that playing music made Samuel very happy. The crowd around the piano was growing larger as more people came to listen. Everyone was amazed by what they were hearing. This was not the performance of a beginner or someone who had just learned a few simple songs. This was the performance of someone with real talent and skill. Marcus began to feel angry. This was supposed to be his moment to humiliate a poor child and entertain his wealthy friends. Instead, the boy was stealing all the attention and making everyone forget about Marcus completely. People were watching Samuel with admiration, not looking at Marcus at all. But even though Marcus was angry, he could not deny what he was hearing. Samuel was playing the piano beautifully. The boy's small hands were creating music that was touching people's hearts. Even Marcus, who did not care much about music, could tell that this was something special. Samuel continued playing, his confidence growing with each note. The boy who had seemed so small and out of place just a few minutes ago now looked like he belonged at the piano. The expensive instrument seemed to come alive under his touch. Marcus realized that his cruel plan was backfiring completely. Instead of embarrassing Samuel, he had given the boy a chance to show everyone how talented he was. And everyone in the lobby was seeing that talent with their own eyes and ears. Samuel's fingers moved across the piano keys with amazing skill. The music he was creating filled the entire hotel lobby with beautiful sounds that no one expected to hear from such a young boy. What had started as Marcus's cruel joke was turning into something completely different. The piece Samuel was playing became more complex and demanding. His small hands stretched to reach keys that seemed too far apart for someone his size, yet he played every note perfectly. His left hand created a strong, steady rhythm while his right hand danced across the higher keys with a melody that made people's hearts skip beats. Marcus stood frozen in place, watching the boy he had tried to humiliate. The confident smile had completely disappeared from Marcus's face. His mouth was slightly open as he listened to music that was far better than anything he had expected. This was not the simple children's song he thought Samuel might attempt. This was serious classical music played with the skill of a professional. The crowd around the piano had grown much larger. Hotel guests from upstairs had come down to see what was happening. Restaurant workers had left their stations to listen. Even people walking by the hotel on the street had stopped and come inside because they could hear the beautiful piano music through the glass doors. Everyone was silent, except for Samuel and his piano. The only sounds in the lobby were the perfect notes flowing from the grand piano. People barely breathed as they listened. Some had tears starting to form in their eyes because the music was so moving and beautiful. Samuel seemed to be in his own world now. His eyes remained closed as his fingers found every correct key without looking. His whole body moved gently with the rhythm of the music. Sometimes he leaned forward when the music became soft and gentle. Other times he sat up straight when the music became powerful and dramatic. The boy's face showed pure joy and peace. Playing the piano was clearly where Samuel felt most happy and comfortable. All the sadness and worry that Marcus had seen in the boy's eyes earlier was gone. Samuel looked like a completely different person when he was making music. Marcus could not understand what he was seeing and hearing. How could a poor child who looked like he came from the streets play piano like this? Where had Samuel learned such difficult music? Who had taught him to play with such skill and feeling? The wealthy guests around Marcus were whispering to each other in amazement. "This is incredible," said a woman in a diamond necklace. "I have never heard a child play like this." "He plays better than most adults I know," replied a man in an expensive suit. "This boy has extraordinary talent. Where do you think he learned to play so well?" asked another guest. Marcus did not like hearing these conversations. People were supposed to be laughing at Samuel, not praising him. Marcus had wanted to show everyone that poor people did not belong in the world of wealthy, educated people. Instead, Samuel was proving that talent and skill had nothing to do with money or social class. Samuel continued playing, and the music became even more beautiful. He was now playing the most difficult part of the classical piece. His fingers moved so fast they were almost blurry. The melody jumped from high notes to low notes and back again. The rhythm became complex and challenging. Yet Samuel played every single note perfectly. Some people in the crowd gasped when they realized how difficult the music was. A few guests were musicians themselves and knew how many years of training it took to play such a piece. They looked at Samuel with shock and respect. Marcus began to feel something he had not felt in many years. He was feeling embarrassed and ashamed, not because Samuel was failing, but because Samuel was succeeding so completely. Marcus realized that he had judged the boy based only on his appearance and had been completely wrong. The boy's talent was undeniable. Even Marcus, who knew very little about music, could tell that Samuel was playing at a professional level. The sound was clear and perfect. The timing was exact. The emotion in the music was real and powerful. Samuel's performance was not just technically perfect, it was also full of feeling and heart. The boy was not just playing notes on a piano. He was telling a story through music. The story seemed to be about struggle and hope, about sadness and joy, about a young person who had faced difficult times but had not given up. Marcus found himself actually listening to the music instead of just waiting for it to end. Despite his anger and embarrassment, he could not deny that what he was hearing was truly beautiful. The music was touching something deep inside him that he had forgotten existed. Other people in the crowd were being moved by the music too. Several women had tears running down their faces. Men who usually only cared about business and money were standing quietly with expressions of wonder on their faces. Children who had come downstairs with their parents were sitting on the floor, completely fascinated by Samuel's performance. The hotel lobby had become like a concert hall. Everyone was focused on the small boy at the grand piano, who was creating magic with his hands. The expensive clothes and jewelry that had seemed so important earlier now seemed meaningless compared to the beauty of Samuel's music. Samuel began playing the final section of the piece. The music became softer and more gentle, like a lullaby. His fingers moved slowly and carefully across the keys. Each note was played with perfect control and timing. The melody was so beautiful that people held their breath so they would not miss a single sound. Marcus watched Samuel's face during this gentle part of the music. The boy looked peaceful and happy. His small hands moved across the keys like they belonged there. It was clear that Samuel had a natural gift for music that could not be taught or bought. As the piece neared its end, the music became quieter and quieter. Samuel's touch on the keys became lighter and more delicate. The final notes were so soft they were almost whispers. When Samuel played the very last note, he held it for a long moment, letting the sound fade slowly into silence. For several seconds after the music ended, no one moved or spoke. The silence in the lobby was complete. Everyone was still processing what they had just heard. No one could believe that such beautiful professional music had come from the small, poorly dressed boy sitting at the piano. Samuel opened his eyes and looked down at his hands resting on the piano keys. He seemed surprised to see all the people staring at him. For a moment he looked like he had forgotten where he was. Then slowly someone in the crowd began to clap. Others joined in. Within seconds the entire lobby erupted in loud applause. People were clapping their hands, cheering, and calling out praise for Samuel's incredible performance. Marcus stood in the middle of the applauding crowd, not clapping, not cheering, just staring at Samuel with a mixture of shock, confusion, and something else he could not quite identify. For the first time in many years, Marcus Blackwood was completely speechless. The applause continued for what felt like forever. People clapped their hands so hard that the sound echoed off the marble walls and crystal lights of the hotel lobby. Samuel sat at the piano bench looking surprised and a little overwhelmed by all the attention. His small hands remained on the piano keys as if he was not ready to let go of the instrument that had just helped him create something magical. Marcus stood in the crowd, still not clapping. He felt like he was in a bad dream. This was not how things were supposed to go. The poor boy was supposed to fail and embarrass himself. Instead, Samuel had just given the most beautiful piano performance that anyone in the lobby had ever heard. As the applause began to quiet down, Samuel looked around at all the faces staring at him. The wealthy guests who had been ready to laugh at him just minutes ago were now looking at him with respect and admiration. Some people had tears in their eyes from listening to his beautiful music. Then Samuel did something that surprised everyone again. Instead of getting up from the piano bench and taking a bow like most performers would do, he placed his hands back on the piano keys. He looked out at the crowd with his big brown eyes and spoke in a quiet voice. "Thank you for listening," Samuel said softly. "I would like to play one more piece for you. This one is my own song. I wrote it myself." The crowd became excited again. People whispered to each other about how amazing it was that this young boy could not only play classical music perfectly, but could also write his own music. Marcus felt his stomach sink even lower. Samuel was not finished surprising everyone. Samuel positioned his hands on the piano keys and began to play again. This time the music was completely different from the classical piece he had just finished. The new song started with slow, sad notes that seemed to tell a story of loneliness and pain. The melody was simple but incredibly moving. Samuel's small fingers picked out notes that sounded like a person crying softly. The music seemed to come from deep inside the boy's heart, sharing feelings that were too deep for words. As Samuel continued playing his original composition, people in the crowd began to understand that they were hearing something very personal and special. This was not just music. This was the story of Samuel's life told through piano notes. The sad beginning of the song seemed to represent difficult times. The notes were slow and heavy, like someone carrying a burden that was too big for them. Marcus found himself thinking about what Samuel's life might have been like. Had the boy faced hunger? Had he been alone and scared? Had he lost people he loved? Marcus looked at Samuel's face as the boy played his own music. The child's expression was different now than it had been during the classical piece. This music was more personal, more emotional. Samuel was sharing his deepest feelings with a room full of strangers. The music began to change slowly. The sad notes started to mix with notes that sounded more hopeful. Samuel's composition was telling the story of someone who had faced hard times but had not given up. The melody began to rise and become stronger, like a person finding the courage to keep going despite their problems. People in the crowd were deeply moved by what they were hearing. Many were crying openly now. The music was so honest and emotional that it touched everyone's heart. Even people who usually did not care much about classical music found themselves completely absorbed in Samuel's story. Marcus watched the faces around him and saw something he had never seen before at one of these wealthy social events. People were not thinking about business deals or showing off their expensive clothes. They were all focused on the music and the young boy who was creating it. Samuel had brought out something real and human in all these rich people. The music continued to grow more hopeful and beautiful. Samuel was now playing notes that sounded like joy and determination. His composition seemed to be saying that even when life is hard, there can still be moments of happiness and beauty. The melody became lighter and more energetic. Marcus found himself actually listening to the music instead of just thinking about how embarrassed he felt. Samuel's song was telling a story that Marcus could understand, even though he had lived a very different life than the boy. The music spoke about universal human experiences: sadness, hope, struggle, and the search for something better. Samuel's playing became more complex as the hopeful part of his composition developed. His left hand played a steady, strong rhythm that sounded like a heartbeat, while his right hand created a melody that seemed to dance above it. The boy's small hands moved with confidence and skill that amazed everyone watching. The hotel lobby had become completely silent except for Samuel's music. Even people walking by outside had stopped to listen through the glass doors. Hotel workers had abandoned their duties to hear this incredible performance. Everyone sensed that they were witnessing something extraordinary. As Samuel's composition reached its climax, the music became powerful and triumphant. The notes seemed to say that no matter how difficult life becomes, the human spirit can survive and even flourish. The melody soared above the steady rhythm, creating a sound that was both beautiful and inspiring. Marcus felt something strange happening inside him as he listened. The music was making him think about his own life in ways he had not done for many years. When was the last time he had felt real joy or satisfaction? When was the last time he had done something just because it was beautiful or meaningful, not because it would make him money or impress other people? Samuel's music seemed to be asking Marcus these questions without using any words. The boy's composition was so honest and pure that it made Marcus realize how empty and shallow his own life had become. All his money and success felt meaningless compared to the beauty that Samuel was creating with just his hands and an old piano. The final part of Samuel's composition was the most beautiful of all. The music became gentle and peaceful, like someone who had found inner calm after a long struggle. The note seemed to say that even though life would always have difficulties, there was still reason to hope and to keep trying. Samuel played the last few notes of his original song very softly. Each note was perfect and full of meaning. When he played the final note, he held it for a long time, letting the sound fade slowly into complete silence. The silence that followed was deeper and more meaningful than any applause could have been. Everyone in the lobby was processing what they had just experienced. Samuel's music had touched something in each person's heart that they had forgotten was there. Marcus stood in that silence and realized that his entire understanding of worth and value had just been challenged by a poor child with extraordinary talent. Samuel had shown everyone in the lobby that true beauty and meaning came from the heart and spirit, not from money or social status. For the first time in many years, Marcus Blackwood felt truly humbled. The silence in the hotel lobby seemed to last forever. Everyone was still thinking about the beautiful music they had just heard from Samuel. The boy sat quietly at the piano, his small hands resting on the keys, looking tired but peaceful after sharing his heart through music. Then, from somewhere in the crowd came the sound of someone crying softly. Everyone turned to see where the sound was coming from. An elderly woman was walking slowly through the circle of wealthy guests, tears streaming down her face. She had gray hair pulled back in a simple bun, and wore a plain but clean dress that was very different from the expensive clothes everyone else was wearing. The woman walked directly toward Samuel at the piano. When she reached him, she gently placed her hand on his shoulder. Samuel looked up at her with relief and love in his eyes. "Mrs. Patterson," Samuel said quietly, his voice showing how happy he was to see her. The elderly woman smiled down at Samuel through her tears. "Oh, my dear boy," she said in a voice that was both sad and proud. "That was the most beautiful thing I have ever heard you play." Marcus and the other wealthy guests watched this interaction with curiosity. Who was this simple-looking woman and how did she know Samuel? Marcus remembered that Samuel had mentioned waiting for someone named Mrs. Patterson, but he had not taken it seriously. Mrs. Patterson helped Samuel stand up from the piano bench. She put her arm around his thin shoulders in a protective way. Then she turned to face the crowd of rich people who were still staring at them. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mrs. Patterson said in a clear, strong voice despite her tears, "I think you deserve to know who this remarkable young man really is." The crowd moved closer, eager to hear the story behind Samuel's incredible talent. Marcus found himself listening carefully too, though he was still feeling embarrassed and confused about everything that had just happened. Mrs. Patterson looked around at all the expensive clothes and jewelry surrounding her. She seemed a little nervous to be speaking to such wealthy people, but her love for Samuel gave her courage. "My name is Eleanor Patterson," she began. "I am a retired music teacher. I taught piano and music theory in the public schools for 43 years before I retired 5 years ago." She paused and looked down at Samuel with affection. "Samuel came into my life 8 months ago. I was volunteering at the community center in the poorest part of our city, trying to help children who had nowhere else to go after school." Mrs. Patterson's voice became softer as she continued. "Samuel would come to the community center every day after school. He never caused trouble. He never asked for anything. He would just sit in the corner and listen whenever I played the old broken piano we had there." The crowd listened intently to every word. Marcus found himself genuinely interested in hearing Samuel's story, though he was not sure why. "One day," Mrs. Patterson continued, "I noticed that Samuel would move his fingers along with the music I was playing, as if he was playing an invisible piano. When I asked him about it, he told me that he loved music more than anything else in the world, but he had never had a chance to learn how to play." Mrs. Patterson wiped tears from her eyes before continuing. "So I started teaching him. Every day after school, Samuel would come to the community center, and I would give him piano lessons on that old, broken instrument. Most of the keys didn't work properly, and it was terribly out of tune, but Samuel didn't care." Samuel looked up at Mrs. Patterson with gratitude. It was clear that this woman had given him something precious, the chance to learn music. "Samuel learned faster than any student I had ever taught," Mrs. Patterson said with pride in her voice. "Within 2 months, he was playing pieces that most students take 2 years to learn. Within 6 months, he was playing classical music that I had never attempted to teach children his age." The wealthy guests were amazed by this information. They looked at Samuel with even more respect, understanding now that his talent was not just natural ability, but also the result of hard work and dedication. Mrs. Patterson continued Samuel's story. You see, Samuel lives in a foster home with 7 other children. His foster parents are good people, but they have very little money. Samuel has never owned his own clothes or toys. Everything he has been shared with other children or given to him by charity. Marcus felt uncomfortable hearing about Samuel's living situation. He had grown up with every advantage money could provide, and it was hard for him to imagine a childhood without material comforts. Samuel's parents died in a car accident when he was 5 years old, Mrs. Patterson explained, her voice becoming even sadder. He has no other family. He has been in foster care for 4 years now, moving from one home to another. The family he lives with now has kept him longer than most, but they may have to give him up soon because they cannot afford to care for so many children. The crowd was silent, processing this information. Many of the wealthy guests had children of their own, and they could not imagine what it would be like for a child to lose everything and everyone they loved. Despite all the sadness and difficulty in his life, Mrs. Patterson continued, Samuel has never complained or felt sorry for himself. Instead, he pours all his emotions into his music. That song you just heard, the one he composed himself, that is Samuel's way of telling the world about his experiences. Mrs. Patterson looked around at the wealthy guests with a mixture of hope and worry. I brought Samuel here tonight because this charity gala is supposed to be about helping children like him. I thought maybe some of you would want to support music education programs for poor children. I never imagined that Samuel would end up performing for all of you. She looked at Marcus directly when she said this, and Marcus felt ashamed. He realized that Mrs. Patterson knew exactly what had happened. She had probably watched from somewhere in the crowd as Marcus humiliated Samuel and forced him to prove himself. Samuel practices every day at the community center, Mrs. Patterson continued. He dreams of becoming a professional musician someday, but he knows that dream may never come true. Music lessons are expensive. Good pianos are expensive. Music schools are expensive. Everything Samuel needs to develop his talent costs money that he and his foster family do not have. The wealthy guests looked at Samuel with new understanding. This boy had extraordinary talent, but he lacked the resources that most of them took for granted. Their own children had private music teachers, expensive instruments, and every opportunity to develop their skills. Samuel had none of these advantages, yet he had achieved more than most children with every privilege. Mrs. Patterson's voice became stronger as she concluded Samuel's story. What you heard tonight is just the beginning of what this young man could accomplish with the right support and opportunities. Samuel has the kind of talent that comes along once in a lifetime. But talent alone is not enough. He needs help from people who have the resources to give him a chance. She looked directly at Marcus again. I hope that some of you will remember Samuel and his music. I hope you will remember that there are many children like him who have incredible potential but lack the opportunities to develop their gifts. The lobby was completely quiet as everyone absorbed Samuel's story. Marcus looked at the boy with new eyes, seeing not just a poor child who had embarrassed him, but a young person who had overcome tremendous challenges to develop an extraordinary talent. For the first time in his life, Marcus Blackwood began to understand the difference between having wealth and having worth. Marcus stood in the silent hotel lobby, staring at Samuel and Mrs. Patterson. The weight of what he had just learned pressed down on him like a heavy blanket. This small boy, whom he had tried to humiliate in front of all these wealthy people, had lived through more pain and difficulty than Marcus had ever experienced in his entire life. The story Mrs. Patterson had told made Marcus think about his own childhood. He had grown up in a mansion with servants, private teachers, and every luxury money could buy. He had never worried about having enough food or a place to sleep. He had never lost anyone he loved. He had certainly never had to prove himself to strangers just to earn their basic respect. Marcus looked around at the other wealthy guests. They were all talking quietly among themselves about Samuel's incredible story and performance. Some were wiping tears from their eyes. Others were shaking their heads in amazement at the boy's talent and strength. But Marcus noticed that many people were also looking at him. They remembered how this whole situation had started. They had watched Marcus mock Samuel and challenge him to play the piano, as if it was all a big joke. Now they knew the truth about Samuel's life, and Marcus could see judgment in their eyes. For the first time in many years, Marcus cared what other people thought of him. Not because of his reputation or his business image, but because he realized he had done something truly wrong. He had been cruel to a child who deserved kindness and respect. Marcus felt a strange sensation in his chest that he had not experienced since he was very young. It took him a moment to recognize what it was. Shame. Real. Deep shame that made him want to hide from everyone in the room. He thought about all the times in his life when he had judged people based on their appearance or their bank account. He thought about all the times he had treated people as if they were less important than him just because they had less money. He had built his entire sense of self-worth on the idea that wealth made him better than other people. Samuel's performance had destroyed that idea completely. This poor orphaned boy had just demonstrated more talent, grace, and dignity than Marcus had ever shown in his entire life. Samuel had faced Marcus's cruelty with quiet strength and had responded by sharing something beautiful with the world. Marcus realized that everything he thought he knew about value and worth was wrong. Samuel had no money, no expensive clothes, no powerful connections, yet he had just given everyone in the hotel lobby an experience they would never forget. What had Marcus ever given to the world that was half as meaningful as Samuel's music? The more Marcus thought about it, the worse he felt. He had spent his entire adult life accumulating wealth and power. But what good had it done for anyone? His companies made money, but did they make the world better? His success had made him rich, but had it made him a good person? Marcus looked at Samuel again. The boy was standing quietly next to Mrs. Patterson, looking tired after his emotional performance. Samuel's clothes were still worn and patched. His shoes still had holes in them, but none of that mattered anymore. Marcus could see now that Samuel possessed something far more valuable than any material possession. The wealthy guests around Marcus were beginning to move closer to Samuel and Mrs. Patterson. They wanted to talk to the boy, to congratulate him on his performance, to learn more about his story. Marcus watched as these rich people, his peers, showed genuine kindness and interest in a poor child. A woman in an expensive dress knelt down to Samuel's level and spoke to him gently. "That was the most beautiful music I have ever heard," she said. "You are incredibly talented." Samuel smiled shyly and thanked her politely. Other guests began approaching as well, all of them treating Samuel with the respect and admiration he deserved. Marcus wanted to approach Samuel too, but he felt frozen in place. What could he possibly say to make up for the way he had treated the boy? How could he apologize for being so cruel and thoughtless? Marcus thought about the challenge he had made to Samuel. He had promised to adopt the boy if Samuel could impress him with his piano playing. It had been a cruel joke, meant to embarrass Samuel when he failed. But Samuel had not failed. He had succeeded beyond anyone's wildest expectations. The promise Marcus had made was still hanging in the air, unresolved. Some of the wealthy guests were probably thinking about it too. They had all heard Marcus make the offer, and they had all witnessed Samuel's incredible performance. Marcus knew that everyone expected him to do something now. He could not just pretend that his challenge had never happened. He had to face the consequences of his words and actions. But more than that, Marcus realized he wanted to do something. For the first time in years, he felt a genuine desire to help another person, not for business reasons or social advancement, but simply because it was the right thing to. Marcus took a deep breath and started walking towards Samuel and Mrs. Patterson. The crowd of wealthy guests noticed him approaching and stepped aside to make room. Everyone was watching to see what Marcus would do next. As Marcus got closer to Samuel, he felt his heart beating faster. He was nervous in a way he had not been nervous since he was a child. All his usual confidence and arrogance had disappeared. He felt small and uncertain, despite being much taller and more powerful than the boy in front of him. Samuel looked up at Marcus as he approached. The boy's brown eyes were calm and patient, showing no anger or resentment despite everything Marcus had put him through. This lack of bitterness made Marcus feel even worse about his behavior. Mrs. Patterson watched Marcus carefully. She could see that he was struggling with something, but she was not sure what he was planning to do. She moved slightly closer to Samuel, ready to protect him if necessary. Marcus stopped a few feet away from Samuel and Mrs. Patterson. The entire hotel lobby was watching him. He could feel the weight of everyone's attention, but for once he did not care about making a good impression or maintaining his image. Marcus looked down at Samuel and tried to find the right words. He had given thousands of speeches in his business career, but he had never faced a situation like this. How do you apologize to a child for being cruel? How do you admit that you were completely wrong about everything? Marcus opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again. He realized that anything he said would sound inadequate compared to the beauty and honesty of Samuel's music. Words felt cheap and meaningless after what he had just witnessed, but Marcus knew he had to try. He owed Samuel an apology, and more than that, he owed him the respect that should have been given from the beginning. Marcus slowly lowered himself down until he was kneeling on the marble floor, bringing himself to Samuel's eye level. This simple action shocked everyone watching, including Samuel and Mrs. Patterson. Marcus Blackwood, the proud and arrogant millionaire, was kneeling before a poor child. When Marcus finally spoke, his voice was quiet and full of emotion that surprised even him. "Samuel," he said, "I owe you an apology." Marcus knelt on the cold marble floor of the hotel lobby, looking directly into Samuel's eyes. The entire room was silent, waiting to hear what the wealthy businessman would say to the young boy he had tried to humiliate. "Samuel," Marcus continued, his voice shaking slightly, "I am deeply sorry for the way I treated you tonight. I was cruel and thoughtless, and you did not deserve any of it." Samuel looked at Marcus with surprise. He had not expected an apology, especially not one delivered with such humility. The boy's eyes showed no anger, only curiosity about why this powerful man was suddenly being kind to him. Marcus took a deep breath and continued. "When I first saw you sitting by the piano, I made judgments about you based on your clothes and your appearance. I thought I was better than you because I have money and you do not. I was completely wrong." The wealthy guests around them listened carefully to every word. Many of them were thinking about their own attitudes toward people who had less money than they did. Marcus's apology was making them examine their own behavior and beliefs. "Your performance tonight was extraordinary," Marcus said, his voice growing stronger with conviction. "But more than that, you showed grace and dignity in the face of my cruelty. You responded to my mockery with beauty and art. You taught me something important about what it means to be a truly valuable person." Mrs. Patterson watched this interaction with amazement. She had seen many wealthy people make promises to help poor children, but she had rarely seen such genuine remorse and humility. Marcus paused for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "Earlier tonight I made you a promise. I said that if you could impress me with your piano playing, I would adopt you. I meant it as a cruel joke, expecting you to fail and embarrass yourself." Samuel nodded slightly, remembering the challenge that had started this entire evening. "But you did not fail," Marcus continued. "You succeeded beyond anything I could have imagined. You have impressed not just me but everyone in this room. Your talent and your character have humbled me completely." Marcus looked around at the crowd of wealthy guests before turning back to Samuel. "So I want to honor my promise, but not in the way I originally intended. Samuel, I would be honored if you would allow me to become part of your life, not as someone who thinks he is rescuing you, but as someone who hopes to learn from you." Samuel looked confused. "I don't understand, sir," Marcus smiled gently. "What I mean is this. If you and Mrs. Patterson are willing, I would like to support your musical education. I want to make sure you have access to the best piano teachers, the finest instruments, and any opportunities you need to develop your incredible talent." Mrs. Patterson's eyes filled with tears of joy. This was more than she had ever dared to hope for Samuel. "But more than that," Marcus continued, "I hope you will teach me something too. You have shown me tonight that true worth comes from the heart and spirit, not from bank accounts or social status. I have spent my whole life focused on accumulating wealth, but I have lost sight of what really matters." Samuel listened carefully to Marcus's words. Despite his young age, the boy understood that something important was happening. This powerful man was offering not just help, but friendship and respect. "Samuel," Marcus said, "you do not need me to adopt you or take care of you. You have Mrs. Patterson, who clearly loves you very much. You have incredible talent that will open doors for you. You have strength and character that will carry you through any challenge." Marcus paused and looked around the lobby at all the wealthy people listening to his words. "What you need is for people like us to recognize your worth and give you the opportunities you deserve. And what we need is to learn from young people like you about what it truly means to be valuable." Samuel thought about Marcus's offer for a moment. Then he spoke in his clear, quiet voice. Mr. Marcus, I would like to learn music from the best teachers, but I also want to stay with Mrs. Patterson. She has been like a grandmother to me. Mrs. Patterson put her arm around Samuel's shoulders. Of course you can stay with me, dear boy. We will work together to make sure you get the education you deserve. Marcus stood up from his kneeling position, feeling lighter than he had in years. Then it is settled. Samuel, I will arrange for you to have the finest music education available, but I have one request in return. What is that, sir? Samuel asked. I would like you to perform at my company's events sometimes, not as entertainment, but as an artist who can remind all of us about what is truly important in life. Your music tonight changed something in me, and I think it could change others too. Samuel smiled, the first real smile Marcus had seen from him all evening. I would like that very much, sir. I love sharing music with people. The crowd around them began to applaud again, but this time the applause was different. It was not just appreciation for Samuel's musical talent, but approval for the transformation they had witnessed in Marcus. Several other wealthy guests approached Samuel and Mrs. Patterson, offering their own support for the boy's musical education. The evening that had started as a typical charity gala had become something much more meaningful. As the crowd began to disperse, Marcus found himself alone with Samuel and Mrs. Patterson for a moment. Samuel, Marcus said, I learned something important from you tonight. You showed me that how we treat others, especially those who seem to have less than us, reveals who we really are inside. Samuel looked up at Marcus with his wise brown eyes. My parents used to tell me that everyone has something valuable to share with the world. Sometimes we just have to look harder to see it. Marcus nodded, understanding that this young boy had just given him the most important lesson of his life. 6 months later, Marcus sat in the front row of a beautiful concert hall, watching Samuel perform with a youth orchestra. The boy wore a nice suit that fit him properly, and he played on a magnificent piano that Marcus had purchased for his music school. But the most important change was not in Samuel's appearance or circumstances. It was in Marcus himself. He had started a foundation to provide music education for children from poor families. He had changed the way he treated his employees and business partners. He had learned to find value in things that could not be bought or sold. Samuel's music had not just impressed the people in the hotel lobby that night. It had transformed them, starting with Marcus himself. The boy who had been mocked for his appearance had taught a room full of wealthy adults about the true meaning of worth. As Samuel played his final notes that evening at the concert hall, Marcus smiled and applauded with genuine appreciation. He had kept his promise to the young musician, but more importantly, Samuel had kept the promise he never knew he was making, to show Marcus and others what it really meant to be valuable. The music ended, but the lesson would last forever.